Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. Today, I welcome Lindsay Kalbach to the front porch, a friend and also a colleague. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you.
So I guess we should. I'm glad that you agreed to come on the show. Let's start by telling everybody how we know each other. I kind of gave the teaser already, but we are colleagues. Lindsay, tell everybody what you teach and maybe like the age group that you have, things like that.
Okay. All right. Well, I teach with Doug at Central Mountain High School. We have some of the same clientele, those AP students. I teach AP literature and also honors intro literature. And then new this year will be honors literature, which will be 10th grade. So that will be new for me this year.
We're going to come back to teaching literature to kids in a little bit, but I always like to start each interview with a little bit about like where you're from, talk a little bit about your childhood growing up, and then we can kind of share one story that we just realized like last year that we have this thing in common, but I'll let you start. So tell us a little bit about where you're born, maybe growing up. Did you have brothers and sisters? What kind of kid were you?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So, well, I was born in Reading, PA, lived in Mooresville for maybe about 6 years until my dad had worked at a steel factory in Reading and decided one day that he wanted to move us to the small town of Loganton, Pennsylvania, to own a campground. So I grew up, that's basically what I knew growing up in Loganton. Best childhood ever. I was an adventurous kid, always out in the woods playing around. I have me and my brother, we were always outside doing things that we were normally getting in trouble for. I could tell you lots of stories about the campground and the types of people that were there, but
I guess I'd have just one question. That was kind of your dad's working in a steel plant and all of a sudden he decides I'm going to buy and own a campground.
Yeah, that's a story. I have not gotten the full answer on why, but I think it had a lot to do with his father passing away and wanting to kind of just start fresh. And so he did. And it was the best decision ever, for me, at least.
So the one day, Lindsay and I have been working together for quite a number of years. And just the one day I was down in her room talking with her about something. And she said, you said, hey, I saw that you posted that you were in Reading this weekend on Facebook. And I said, well, yeah, that's where I'm from. And she goes, well, I was born and raised there too. And I was like, what? And then we had this exchange back and forth, kind of talking about where was this and all this stuff. And we were able to get it down almost till we were like 2 streets away from each other growing up. And of course, never knew it. But I just thought that was like one of those, it's such a small world situation where you're like,
yeah, and how we both ended up in Lock Haven teaching at the same high school. And if I believe correctly, I went to preschool with your brother.
Kindergarten or that first year right before you moved. So it's totally crazy. I went home and told my brother that story that day to see if he remembered your name or anything like that. And he said, wow, it was kindergarten. I don't really remember. Yeah. And that if you're only there for 1 year, so you don't really necessarily get to create long lasting friendships in kindergarten. But I just thought that was one of those crazy small world stories for sure. So when you went to college, you didn't go to college to become a teacher. Am I right?
I started out, I thought I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Oh. So I went, and within the first few observational times, I was, oh gosh, no younger children. This is not for me, which is good about the program there. So then I changed to secondary ed English and I did not like it. And
what? Okay. All right. So let me ask, what didn't you like about it?
I don't know if I was 17, 18 when I first went to college. I just didn't get that. I don't know. I wasn't as into reading as I am now and writing. And I just needed that time to find my love for literature and writing. So I did continue into the program and just graduated with a writing degree, a bachelor's degree in English writing. And of course, what do you do with that? So I ended up working in insurance for a while and hated that and decided I should go back and finish. I only had maybe 3 semesters left to finish to get my teaching certificate. So I went back and did that.
And when you went back, you got English, and did you also get special ed?
I did. Yes. So I was a dual major at the time. And then it took a few years to get a position, teaching position. And of course I got in with the special ed. So I'm glad I did get that.
Could you talk a little bit about teaching special ed at the high school level? If you think back, like you were a brand new teacher, and were you put into like co-teach English classes, or did you have like your own room with just special ed kids?
Well, I had co-teaching. Well, actually, the first position I had was two long-term positions. One for an English teacher who had resigned, and then one for one who was ill and who was out for some time. So then my first position was a co-teach position in an English classroom.
How tough is it to teach special ed?
It's not the students at all. I think it's the resources and, all of the paperwork and the testing and everything that has to be done on top of teaching. So I feel for our special ed teachers so much, because I know even with these past few years, it's been difficult to get all of the information that they need about their students. So
you had mentioned that it took you a while to find your love of reading literature and writing. So I want to ask you this. What is it that you love about reading literature? What is it about that just is like that's your flame, or that lights your candle, or whatever?
I don't know what we talk about this with my students at the beginning of the year. I'm like, why do you like or dislike reading? And a lot of them say, which is the same for me, it's just like an escape from reality. And I know a lot of people have those escapes from their lives and whatever they need. But for me, literature just allows you to connect to a character or somebody that's like you, or and it's so universal. Like stories are so universal. I just think about like history and how these stories have just been told over and over and over again, and everybody can find something in literature. And that's what I like about it.
What do the kids that don't like to read say? I mean, what are their reasons?
It's just time consuming. They don't really have the time to do it, or this whole idea of reading to them has been something that they associate with schoolwork. So my job is to try to get them to see literature quite differently than how they have maybe in the past.
All right. So the magic question is, how do you do that?
Well, we give options. We read things that they might enjoy reading, all types of literature, not just simply dead white men. Because and I've actually had students in the past, before we changed a lot about our curriculum. Do we ever read anything that's not by a dead white guy? So I think more diverse literature is what they want, and just having them, we read something, I'm say, okay, what did you like? And I just don't think that they've ever maybe even thought that, well, maybe I wasn't reading this to like it. I was just reading it because you told me to. So I try to get them to read things that they enjoy and give options. I think that that's important. Oh, sorry, my dogs are
That's okay. I was thinking about that. And like as I've grown older, the things I like to read versus what I didn't like to read. And I think kind of like you had said, as a kid, I think reading was partially some things I really like to read for fun, but then there was also the school aspect of it. Well, I have to read this book for English class, or right. I have to write this essay for English class based on the book. So how has your reading changed, especially now, like, because this is something you enjoy, but it's also your job. So how do you separate those two worlds and that you don't get overburdened by reading because it's, this is what you do from 9 to 5, but then also this is something I enjoy to do.
Yeah, I don't look at what I have to read for work as a job, because I could read the same thing over and over again and find something new in it and get excited about maybe being able to share that with my students and have them discover it. But I'm reading 4 books right now, just because I have the time over break, and it's all over the place. Like I just enjoy reading everything. And I picked up a book that I read in college, and I disliked it so much in college. And now I'm reading it and why did I hate this? I really, really enjoyed this. I mean, it's 15 years later, and you're in a different place in life. But so that's what I love that. Like, you could hate something one day, but then find meaning in it another day.
I've often wondered this for teachers that have to teach English and literature. How do you keep like this, someone that's been teaching for 10, 15, 20 years or whatever, and every year they do To Kill a Mockingbird. Let's just take that example. How do you keep it fresh? This is the 15th year that I've read this book. And then you might be reading it with like 3 or 4 different classes and discussing it with 3 or 4 different classes year after year. How do you keep a story fresh and exciting for kids that it's their first time reading it, even though for you it might be your 134th time reading it?
I would say that's Of Mice and Men by Steinbeck for me, our 9th graders. I don't know. I never get bored with the text. I just fall more and more in love with Steinbeck's writing as I read it over and over again. And sometimes I don't read it. I assign it and the kids read it, and I just know it so well that I could probably recite every line in that book for you. But I don't know, it's just the connection that the kids make with the characters that I love the most with that book.
As we work with kids that are growing up in a very different age than we grew up, and everybody talks about how attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter. Do you see that in your classroom as well, with giving kids stuff to read that they can focus to read, or that they have difficulty doing that?
Yeah, I'd say they do have a difficult time focusing on even just like simple tasks. It's like the cell phone is really distracting. So I think knowing when to use technology and how to use technology is very important. So engaging them with these new smart boards and having them do things with that. I mean, I'm still learning all of that, but I think that's something that's useful. But I guess it's all about like how you run your classroom. And you always have those students who don't want to be in an English class, but luckily with honors and AP students, I am very lucky. So I don't complain about the 2 or 3 students who sometimes seem distracted. I try to maybe make it a little bit more challenging, or see what they need and why they're kind of distracted. Let's talk
about the other aspect of your job, teaching writing. How do you approach that in this day and age as well? Thinking about how our students talk to each other and how they communicate via, mainly text and Snapchat. And now you're asking them to sit down and actually write. How do you approach that?
Yeah, that's the most difficult, I think, because they want to rush an essay. Like revision, what's editing, what's revision. So that's something that we spend a lot of time, like, just slow down and write this essay. And always that, well, how many paragraphs, how many sentences? I hate those questions, obviously, but it's kind of like trying to get them to realize that an essay doesn't maybe need to be that structured 5 paragraphs helps. And trying to get them to see like the purpose of their writing. But yeah, the rushing thing and the Grammarly. Why use Grammarly? Well, it's not going to get everything.
Well, let's for those listeners that don't know what Grammarly is, tell everybody real quick like what that is, because I deal with that too. Well, my issue in my classroom is Google Translate that I'm fighting all the time. But let everybody know what Grammarly is and how kids are using that.
Well, it's there's a portion of it that's free, and it'll catch errors in your typing, and it will give you suggestions on, your usage and things, and it'll change. It'll tell you about, commas and punctuation and all of that. And sometimes it's not accurate. And sometimes it's useful for a lot of students. It'll catch the spelling errors, especially with the new Chromebooks when they type. I'm not sure that it catches everything. I see a lot of lowercase i's, and I just want to gouge my eyes out. Because, well, I use Grammarly. Well, it's like their brain turns off from the things that they know about grammar and spelling and all of that. And they just rely on the technology to do it for them, which is the world anymore.
Do you find, given all of the technology that these kids are saturated with, that in the end, they still are creative? Like, I get sometimes people will say to me, oh, these kids today are they're all robotic. All they do is look at their phones. They don't, they're not thinking for themselves. They just eat whatever spoon fed to them through social media. What do you find about the kids that you're working with in regards to creativity, especially when you talk about writing? Here's an outlet for somebody to express creation and creativity. What are you finding?
Yeah, I would totally disagree with that mentality that students aren't creative or kids today aren't creative, because when I we'll lecture, I'll lecture on certain aspects of writing, and then we'll practice those things in our AP literature course. But then each section will do like a creating on your own, where they're building these skills through like a creative story of their own, and or like a poem of their own. And I am always blown away by their stories, by their implementation of what we've done. So it's there when there's not structure, and when they can be creative, they're very impressive. And that's why I teach literature, and why I teach composition, because I love when I get like teary-eyed reading some of their short stories. And I'm like, this is pretty pathetic. And then like I'll be teary-eyed in front of them, and they're like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm just really proud of you, because you're doing really well. So that's why I teach.
I think the other thing that we run into, and I know that this has happened, we share a lot of students, you and I, and you'll also get the opportunity, not just the creative essay aspect, but you'll also get kids that'll just like pour the whole story of themselves out in an essay. And I often get asked to proofread stuff before they hand it in to you sometimes. So I get to read some of this writing before you see it. And that's what also blows me away with a lot of these kids that I'm working with too, is that, and I don't think this was true about maybe my generation as much, and it definitely wasn't true about our parents and our grandparents' generation, but I find a lot of the kids that we're teaching today are not afraid to share what we would have always considered personal. You don't talk about this stuff. I mean, they'll just put it out there. And when I read some of it, I am completely blown away at just how open a lot of these kids are, and I don't even know how to explain it, not worried about maybe what someone else might think, or, I mean, because we've read, both you and I have read some essays from kids that was, I mean, they put their heart out there, and like have written about some things that have happened to them as kids that was hard to read. And I can't imagine what it was like for them to actually write it and put it on paper. What's your experience with that? I kind of shared some of my reactions, but for you too, because you get one aspect where you're getting kids and you're reading these creative essays, but then you're also, you flip the page over, and now you got this kid that's telling you about, I don't know, how they were abused when they were 7 years old or something like that.
Right. Yeah. It's hard, but I'm thankful that I guess that they have that outlet, and that if that's a cry for help, or if that's something, then at least they're writing it down, and there's something that can be done about it. But most times it's something has already been done about it, and they're just kind of, as they get older, maybe feeling more comfortable with who they are, and how that affected them. And because we talk about like writers write based on what they know, and what they've experienced. So if they mimic that, then I'm doing my job, I guess, if I'm getting them to write down their stories.
Well, you're also doing an aspect of your job that I think is so important for educators, is that you're creating an environment in your room, at least, that they feel comfortable enough to say that stuff to you. I think that says a lot about the relationships that we build with some of these students. And you don't build them with all kids for sure, but you're doing something right, Lindsay, that your environment, your four walls that these kids are walking into every day are comfortable. They feel comfortable enough and welcomed enough that they can say that stuff. It's I don't know. I don't think I had too many teachers growing up that, I had a lot of teachers that cared, don't get me wrong, but I guess, the 90s were a different era too, in the sense that you just didn't, this is stuff you didn't talk about, or I don't know. So, I think that also speaks to how education has changed and school has changed over 30 years, which I want to ask you this question. And I'm not saying just our school district that we work for. I'm saying in general, what do you think public ed is doing right?
Oh, that's a heavy question. I just think public education in itself is what maybe we're doing right in America. Free education for everyone. Other things, opportunities for students that they may not have had opportunities, in other places to experience things. Some of our students in our school never leave Lock Haven. Like they'll never leave Lock Haven their entire lives. So I think that opportunity to maybe meet people and to know that there is something else out there, there are opportunities. That's one of the words I keep saying over and over again, I guess. So I think that giving them a chance, I guess, is what public education is doing right. And I guess hopefully, I look at our school and I think about all of our teachers and how their main goal is to help kids. And I think that that's one thing that we're doing right.
All right, I have to flip it. What is one thing or some things that public ed is not doing right in your eyes as an educator?
Oh, not doing right. I think certain programs and certain things maybe aren't being funded well enough. Thinking about like the arts program and all of that, I just think that there are some things that are overlooked. Like I struggle with athletics. I was an athlete, but I think there's too much focus put on athletics, not only in public education, but maybe in our country, and the importance of it, rather than maybe the equal importance of other things that students may like. Because I'll have students who hate sports, and that just seems to be always the focus of a school, like pep rallies and the sports programs, and they get all of the attention. And I think other avenues are put on that back burner and seen as maybe not as important. So
I think those are all valid points. There's a lot of other things I think we're not doing right or that could be improved upon, but we'll maybe save that for another conversation.
Your opinions might be stronger than mine.
Maybe a little bit, I don't know. But I think, working in the trenches every day, we do see things that the average, even the average parent doesn't see, and especially just the average taxpayer that doesn't even have a child or a grandchild in the system at the time.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of education that could happen in the greater society about what's going on in public ed. I think one thing that bothers me a lot is when you're on social media and you have a lot of people saying about, this is what schools are doing and they shouldn't be doing this. And you read the comments and you're like, but that doesn't happen. Like, it's like, there's this idea of what the average American thinks is happening in public ed right now. And then there's the reality. And a lot of times they are like two totally different roads. And that frustrates me that we have this pretty negative outlook, I think, by a lot of Americans on our job and how we do our job. And it's tough. But I try to let the water roll off the back, but sometimes it hits. So,
and unfortunately, that's the only thing you can do as one person, right? Let it roll off.
Right. All right. Enough talking shop. Let's move to a different topic. And this is something I've been trying to figure out how I want to. And I talked to you about this ahead of time, so it's not like I'm totally blindsiding you. But how do I want to say this? You, blah. You are a married lesbian in an area that is not very progressive. Can I say it that way? Can we talk a little bit about your experience?
Absolutely. I think my experience is very different than a lot of gay people's experience. I grew up in this area and was known as straight. I was married to a man for 10, well, we were together for 10 years, married for about 3 years. He's still in my life. So wonderful, wonderful person. Our families still talk. I need a Netflix series just to explain my life. But so, yeah, I think, and then I met my amazing wife, Gigi, and we have been together for 11 years now, married for 7, almost 8. And I would say I don't like stereotypes, and I don't necessarily look the part of this stereotypical lesbian, I guess you could say. So people don't, and that's what I don't like about our area. People will pass judgment on the way somebody looks, like, immediately. So I think that that's something that people get to know me just because I look a certain way. I guess like, I don't know how to explain that. And
can I ask you this question? Because out of all the episodes I've had, actually, you're my first guest that is gay. And we were talking about how kids, in your classes, how they feel comfortable or talking about, aspects of them or being themselves or allowing their real person to shine through. The process of coming out. Now, I'm a heterosexual man, and I do have a lot of gay friends, but I've never really talked to too many of them about that process. So if like, what was that process like for you to come out? And could you walk through that a little bit with me?
Sure. I didn't even know it about myself. There were hints, about, oh, okay, I have these feelings. But I was 25 and I didn't really have those feelings until I was 25. So for a lot of people, I feel like they struggle and struggled a lot more maybe than I did. But just knowing, like, when I met Gigi, I just knew, like, she was my person. Like, that was it for me. And I understood that about myself. So everybody's story, I think, is very different, and their experiences, like, if a kid approaches me and they're like, well, I think I am this way, can you, I'm like, no, I can't tell you anything. Like, that's your story to tell. That's not my, I can talk to you, but, like, I'm not going to share that. And it was scary, like, telling my parents, because I had been straight for, 25 years. They had known nothing else. So it's scary when you're unsure of how others will react. But I think that that's something that shouldn't have an effect on whether or not you share that with people, but it does, because it's very scary to think that maybe someone you love may not love you back. And that's really hard.
Yeah. And you've shared with me that you do have some relatives in your family that have not been very welcoming of this situation.
Yeah. And I've not spoken to them for 11 years. So, and it just comes to a point in your life where you have to find, people who love you for who you are, and you want to be happy. And I don't even like to say, like, you should be accepted. Like, it just is sad to me that just because you're gay, that somebody might not like you anymore. Like I remember telling my dad, I'm the same person. Like I'm just a girl who likes girls. Like, so, and for him, it took a really long time. And and I understand that. I understand, but I just wish people would realize that their child or their loved one or their sister or their brother, they're the same person. And now they're reaching out to you, the person that they love, that they want to share this really big thing with. And it's hard when it's just devastating when you're met with a wall.
I think, we're looking at the topic of homosexuality in our society right now. I mean, we look at the era that we grew up in and its visibility and now to today. What's your take on all that? Why do you, are we doing, I don't know how to even ask this question. I think of Will and Grace was a show that came out in the late 90s that really was one of the first, it wasn't the first show that dealt with the topic, but I think it was the first show that mainstream show that had it as a major part of the story of the show. And now as we fast forward to 2021, just the other night, I was watching a TV and a commercial came on. I don't even remember what the commercial was for. Maybe it was for insurance or something. I don't know, but it had a gay couple in it as if this was completely normal in our society. Do you think that we, at least the media or society we know that society has been much more accepting over the last 15 years for these lifestyles. Do we still have room to go? Maybe that's what I'm going to ask.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of room to grow. But I do think, making it more mainstream on commercials, like you said, I think that's helpful, because I think the biggest issue, I think, with people who don't necessarily understand it is fear, and people who maybe don't know somebody who is gay or who, I think that it took my family quite a while because we didn't know anyone. Like I didn't know anyone who was gay growing up in Sugar Valley, Loganton, Pennsylvania. I mean, and had there been people, I think they were fearful to say things. But I think just knowing somebody and maybe knowing them first, because I hate that comes first. Like I'm not like, hi, I'm a lesbian. Like I'm like, hi, I'm Lindsay. I just think, that, and a lot of people can't get past that mindset. Like, oh, and it's not like it's not like, I guess it's like a trait. I don't know. It just, people see it sometimes as a negative thing, and then they're not willing to get to know the person.
Right. You had talked to me the other day about a group in Lock Haven that is, could you talk about them a little bit? Like who are they and what is their mission, and kind of like, how do they fit into this scenario, into this puzzle?
Sure. So Clinton County LGBT group, we currently have like an Instagram page and also a Facebook page run by my friend Bree Reynolds. She sort of got us all together, people in the community and advocates for the community. So anyone really is willing to help out and to raise awareness. We have events within Lock Haven, just trying to make a presence and maybe make more people feel like they can be themselves, and offer training to businesses about the LGBT community, and just maybe make people more aware and understanding. If they have questions, not be afraid to ask questions, because I feel like it's a topic where people are afraid to say something because they don't want to offend someone.
This is exactly like when we first started talking about this in the conversation today. I struggled to figure out what to say first, because, and I'm a very progressive person, and I don't, I have no qualms about any of this, but there's still that, I don't know if it's just because of the era that I grew up in, but how I struggle sometimes with how to initiate conversation when it comes to certain topics. And I'm someone that loves to talk, and I'm very outgoing and very extroverted person. But even still, like, and I don't, maybe this is a generational thing for me too. I stumble sometimes trying to begin conversation about some of these topics. And I always feel that if I do, then it makes me look like like you mentioned, there must be a little bit of fear there, or does he think I'm a little weird or something? And why he can't just say the question, Doug, don't stumble, just say it. And I never want to come across that way, but I have a hard time putting into words sometimes questions in regards to this topic alone. And the other thing that we're dealing with too in America right now and in our classrooms is transgenderism. And when you have a student one day come to you and say, I am now Doug, I want you to call me Doug from now on. And there's, I try to be as welcoming and as open as possible, but there is, your mind has to, at least for me anyway, my mind has to shift gears all of a sudden and say, okay, I've been calling this student Susie, and now all of a sudden I need to call them, Doug or whatever. So I think looking from someone that's not in the community, I think it is still difficult for a lot of us to kind of like engage in conversation. I think part of it too is that we don't get the opportunity very often to practice this type of conversation either. That's just kind of my thoughts as someone from outside the community. So when I look at this group that you're talking about, and we have a student group on campus too, that kind of is along the same lines. I think it's great that the message is getting out there and allowing at least the opportunity for conversation, because as you know, and the whole point of this podcast is that through conversation is how, in my mind, how society continues to run and be successful. And as soon as we stop talking is when we run into problems.
Right.
It's kind of your thoughts on my ramblings there for the last minute or so.
No, I totally get everything and agree with what you're saying, and like the apprehension that's there, because in society we're either so far left or so far right that we're just kind of afraid somebody might really get upset. And there are people who do get upset in our community because they've struggled for so long, and it is hard, like you said, with like a young student who's changing and progressing into a new person, and we've only known one person for so. I still have a student sometimes I mess up on, but she's fine with it. But there are people who may not be fine with it, and you're going to feel uncomfortable when you make those mistakes. But I think it's important to have a conversation and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I do not disrespect you. I'm just naturally, my mind needs some time to make those changes. And I think so if we expect something to change like quickly, that's and I think most of our community understands that it takes time. Like it really does take time for people. And I think about my own father, it took years, so and then you meet somebody who's like, okay, fine. Yeah, I knew all along, like I have no problem with you. And so it's hard to know what to say, when to say it, how to say it. And we live in that age where everybody seems to be offended by something.
Or the thing that I also find is everyone's trying, or not everyone, but there are a lot of people that are trying to engage, and their goal is to make sure that they don't offend. And right. we're there's this eggshell that we're walking on. And I don't want to feel that way, but I think there are a lot of people in our society when it comes to a lot of topics, not just this topic, but other topics too, where we're so apprehensive about engaging in conversation because we don't want to anger the other person or offend them or think that we're going to offend them, that it actually debilitates the conversation and it stops growth from happening. I think we need to get past that, or at least try to get past that aspect of it too.
Yeah. And I am an open book, and I will have a conversation with anybody, obviously, about my experience. And I just think that it takes some people time to get to that point. And that's like hard, because you'll meet somebody who's so open and then somebody who just doesn't want to talk about anything. So, and that makes it, and that's on all topics, like you said. So I think that's what makes it so difficult. But I think having a conversation and being, respectful and, just saying like, I don't know, and I want to know. And I think that training that our group offers is wonderful, because she did that with our administrators a few years ago. And I got to sit in on that. And it was enjoyable to watch our administrators from all of our schools just be able to ask questions. And Bree was just kind of like making jokes and making everyone feel comfortable. I mean, there are a lot of people who are still very uncomfortable because based on people's religion or whatever, they may be struggling with acceptance or even acknowledgement. So and that's another aspect of, the conversation is people's religious beliefs. So.
Well, Lindsay, when you are not teaching and advocating, what do you like to do in your free time? If you tell me to read, I'm going to have to laugh because.
Well, I would say that's one of them. Like I just finished 2 books over the break so far. So
are you the type of reader that like when you start a book, you can't stop until it's done? Or are you the type of person that I can read a chapter, put that book down and come back to it like 2 or 3 days later? What kind of reader are you?
I read multiple books at once, so I can pick up a book and read it. And then like, if I find it to be a little boring or this section I'll put it down. I'll pick something else up. So I mean, right now I'm reading fiction and nonfiction. So I do like to read, but I also love spending time with friends and family, drinking coffee, drinking wine, and hiking, doing things outside.
Yeah, I know that you're a big outdoors person because you said you grew up in a campground when you were a kid, and you travel to Maine. Regularly. Could we say regularly? Like every year you go up to Maine?
Yearly. Yep. Yearly. We went, Gigi and I went there for our honeymoon. So we've been back every year since then. And we love Acadia National Park. So hiking and doing all of that is something that we love. We just recently went to Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge for a little bit of a break and went to the Smoky Mountains, but like you said, a lot of the roads were closed. We couldn't believe it because it was 70 degrees when we went there. And I'm like, why are the roads closed? Well, they're anticipating winter, I guess. But so we love to get out and enjoy hiking, but we also love historical. We went to the Titanic Museum and we love to do historical things. So we're nerds.
No, that's sounds a lot like the Maidenford household. Well, Lindsay, we end every episode with 10 quick questions. Are you ready for your 10 quick questions?
Sure.
I know the answer to at least 1 or 2 of these already, but I want to hear you say it anyway. Number 1, what is your morning drink of choice?
Coffee.
And how do you take your coffee?
Sometimes black, but sometimes with just a little bit of cream.
Are you a person that drinks coffee all day long, or are you just a morning coffee drinker?
I know, I'm all day long.
Yeah, me too. Welcome to the team, or it's a good team to be on. All right. Who is a go-to musical artist or group for you?
I enjoy Miranda Lambert and also The Script. And then I'll have to plug The Script.
Who's The Script?
It's a band. I can't believe you don't know who The Script is. You'll have to check them out.
What genre music?
I don't even know how to like rock, semi pop. I'm not even sure. Yeah.
Well, I'll check them out. Okay.
Also, I have to plug Private Stock Trio.
Really? Yeah, they're pretty good. Pretty good. They're a local group here in Central Pennsylvania that if you're ever in the area and you see them playing, check them out, please. All right. Question number 3. What movie can you watch over and over again and it doesn't get old?
A League of Their Own.
Oh, it's a great film. That's a great film. Number 4. What is the last thing that you read?
Oh gosh, what was it? I just finished it and I can't remember. I would say, I have to look. I'm sorry. I don't remember.
You're always reading. You're always reading. I'm going to throw. So I listened to a podcast that Alan Alda does, and he asks his guest every episode, what is a book that changed your life? I'm going to throw that question at you since you teach reading. Is there a book that changed your life?
I loved East of Eden, but I don't know that it changed my life. But I really love anything by Steinbeck.
He's good. He's good. I agree. All right. Number 5. What's your favorite pizza topping?
Pepperoni and banana peppers.
Okay. Number 6, laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Hike.
Yeah. Do you like the beach at all?
I do, but I don't like water. I am afraid of, that's my biggest fear is being in water and drowning. So I don't like water.
We are really peas in a pod, you and I, Lindsay, because I am the exact same way. Must be
Mooresville brain.
I guess something. I don't know. All right. Number 7. You have invited me over for dinner. What are you making?
Gosh. Probably something from HelloFresh because it's easy. Or Gigi's making something, not me.
That's fine. That's fine.
Maybe like a Polish dinner.
Oh, there we go. I like Polish food. Okay. Number 8. What is a dream vacation destination of yours?
I'd love to go out west, Northern California, and Washington State. That would be a goal. Dream goal.
I tell everybody that if you haven't been to Yosemite, every American should have to go to Yosemite National Park. It is, that part of California is breathtakingly beautiful. And just, there are times when you stand and look and you're like, this can't be real. It is. I hope you get out there sometime soon, Lindsay. It's unbelievable. Number 9, what is something that you're afraid of?
Well, other than water, I would say just like I'm fearful, like of losing family. Yeah, that's a big thing, I guess, for everyone.
I think so. Yeah, I agree. All right. Last question. What job other than one that you've had would you love to have?
Boy, I would love to work in a national park. Just kind of like fixing trails and doing all of that outdoor work. That would be enjoyable. Maybe one day when I retire in Acadia, that would be my dream.
Imagine waking up to that sunrise every morning.
Yes.
That'd be great. Well, Lindsay, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. This conversation flew by. Holy cow. I really appreciate our friendship. I love that I can just walk down the steps at work and walk past your room and like wave, or if you're not, if we actually have time to sit down and talk, I always enjoy any opportunity I have to talk with you. So that's what's made this interview really special. And I really appreciate you coming up on the front porch. So thanks so much, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.